Namaste and welcome to another episode of Itihasdhir. The book that we will be covering today is called Nalanda.
Oh, how
And
wonderful.
and we have today its author, Mr. Abhay K, with us. Welcome to Itihasdhir, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm delighted to be with you this evening.
The book very aptly begins with there is no clear and entirely reliable interpretation of Nalanda's past, or for that matter, the past of just about anything. Rather, there are scattered ideas that we try to string together as history, an overview stitched from snippets. And there is no single interpretation uh, of these snippets, but rather competing and conflicting interpretations. So, as we take this episode forward, I hope that we try to understand, uncover, deliberate upon many of these conflicting interpretations with
Mhm.
the author of the book, who we have had the privilege of having with us today. Aditi, I think you can take the session forward and answer the first question.
Yes. So, sir, your book is one of the more authoritative books on Nalanda, and the history of Nalanda has been a subject of so much debate throughout decades. Many facts are shrouded in mystery, and many facts are very loosely told to history students. Like, I've been a student of history myself, and the facts which were told to us were like all over the place.
Mhm.
And you have strung together, however, all the facts together to deliver to your reader an amazing narrative about Nalanda and how it changed the world. So, my first question is that what was your motivation behind writing Nalanda? Has your personal journey as a poet shaped how you viewed the topic and wrote the book?
Well, I wrote the book because I come from Nalanda, first of all. So that's a personal journey and a journey that I always wanted to undertake uh, because it's my heritage. It's who I am. So while I was growing up in Nalanda, uh, I am from a place called Rajgir, which is part of Nalanda district and is about a few kilometers from Nalanda, ruins of Nalanda Mahavihara. So I usually our parents would take us to me and my brother, elder brother. We would go and see the site since childhood, and we would be told that there were 10,000 students studying there once upon a time, and there were thousands of teachers, and the library it had a huge library, and the library was burning for 6 months when it was uh, set to fire. So that's all I knew about Nalanda, and we obviously had picnic there. We enjoyed visiting the site, like the red bricks, uh, which are exposed after the excavation. So that's all I knew about Nalanda. I had no idea what was taught there, who were the students, where did they come from, why Nalanda was such an important seat of learning. How did it become so famous? Why Nalanda, not other Mahaviharas? There were thousands of Mahaviharas spread all across Asia. And so all these questions I had in my mind, and I had no answers. So I tried to find answers myself, and that's how this book has happened.
So the very title of the book implies that Nalanda had changed the world as we know it. So I wanted to ask you, could you give us a few examples about how it changed the world and how, after its destruction, it still stays a very relevant topic of discussion even today?
So, so Nalanda was, first of all, it was a Mahayana center of learning, primarily. Buddhism, when it evolved, it got, initially Buddha gave his teachings in Magadhi Prakrit, and Buddha had a disciple, key disciples, male disciples, chief male disciples, Sariputra and Mogglayana, both coming from Nalanda, and both of them were childhood friends, and they had joined Buddha, along with many other followers of a philosopher called Sanjay Belatiputta, and so it Samrat Ashok, when he became a Buddhist after the Kalinga War, he went to Rajgriha, he went to Nalanda and built a stupa. This is 300 years later from Buddha's time, at Nalanda. And this was Sariputra's stupa, around which Nalanda Mahavihara grew over 1,000-year period of time. So the key contribution which Nalanda made was the idea of university itself. Today, we know the great universities of Harvard and Oxford, but there's a connection between Nalanda and Oxford and rest of the universities in the world, because the idea of a modern campus of a university, a residential university or a campus, that happens at Nalanda. You have the quads or quadrangles around which the residences of the monks are located. So you have a central courtyard which is quadrangular or square, and there where all the teaching happens, all the gathering of the monks and the teachers happen, and all the teaching happens. And that quad or quadrangle is surrounded by the living quarters of the monks. And that's how even today if you go to Oxford, you can see the quads of Oxford or the courts of Cambridge, and you can see the journey. You can read the journey, how a college or a vihara, the idea of a college has traveled from Nalanda to the west, through Central Asia and the Arab world, and then to the rest of the world. So that's a huge contribution. You cannot imagine that a place like Nalanda was a precursor to a modern university, not only in terms of architecture, which I've shared you, architectural plan, but also the number of subjects taught. Nalanda was a Mahayana, as I told you, a Mahayana seat of learning. But teaching at Nalanda was not limited to Buddhism. All forms of knowledge known to the mankind was taught at Nalanda. Grammar was taught, alchemy was taught, medicine was taught, astronomy was taught, mathematics was taught. And what was most important about Nalanda's teaching was the one subject informed the other. So mathematics informed astronomy, metaphysics informed medicine. So it was all interrelated. They were all interconnected. They were not like that, okay, we will study just this discipline. And that's where you have the second most important, or you can say another great contribution from Nalanda, and that is fundamental to the functioning of the modern society, and that is zero. So Aryabhat, who teaches at Nalanda, becomes the first human to use zero as a digit. And he not only uses zero as a digit, but also comes up with sine functions. Earth goes round, Earth revolves on its axis, and calculates the value of pi up to 4 decimal points, starts gives theories in mathematics in his book Aryabhatya, which later on is improved upon by Brahmagupta. in 8th century, and then it gets translated into Arabic as Sindh Hind, and then travels to the west, to Europe. So that's a fundamental contribution. In fact, there's a relationship between metaphysics, the philosophy, the philosophy, Nagarjuna's philosophy of Sunyata, and Sunya. Both happen to be at the same place. Nagarjuna is in 1st to 2nd century AD, who is the main architect of Nalanda, actually. And you have 400 years later or 300 years later, Aryabhat coming up with Sunya, using it as a digit. So the beauty of Nalanda was that one discipline was influencing the other discipline, and it was also the idea of international education, in the sense that you had students who were coming from all the way from China, from Korea, from Tibet, from Mongolia, from various Central Asian countries, and Bukhara is mentioned, Bactria, which could be known as Bactria. So this is you have international faculty, universal number of subjects being taught, whatever is known. These are all examples of the education is free. So once it's an education based completely on merit. So nobody is asking you, which community you belong to. If you can answer the questions to the Dwarpala Pandit, who is at the gate, if you can engage him in debate and discussion satisfactorily, you are in. And then you don't have to worry about paying the monthly tuition fees and the hostel accommodation charges and so on. It's completely paid for. All you have to do is to study. So you have creation of, you have knowledge as a public good. All these things are precursors of a modern university. In fact, actually they are more advanced than a modern university, because in modern university you are there, the study is not for jobs. So no monk who is going there is going to get a job that I'll pass out from Nalanda and then I have to go and get a job there. So it's the true meaning of a university is the search for knowledge, or search for true knowledge. And Nalanda was an example of where students went not for searching jobs, but searching knowledge, searching the nature of reality, true nature of reality. And when they were searching for this, they found all that knowledge which we are proud of. So Nalanda is not only actually a precursor to the university, but it's actually has all the blueprint for a future of education in the rest of the world, actually, that what education should be like, not what it is right now. So it was much more than what we have in modern universities.
So, Sir, Nalanda did have a very huge impact on the outside world and
Mhm.
across the borders of Bharat as well, And as you've also mentioned, we see the names of so many famous travelers, especially
Mhm.
the Chinese who visited Nalanda, and they took many of its principles and its teachings homes.
Uh-huh.
So, how did that impact the spread of Buddhism as a religion? Right.
Well, so I have written about it in Nalanda, how it has contributed. Three great Nalanda's philosophies. The first one was Madhyamaka or Sunyata, which was given by Nagarjuna, and later on it evolved into Yogacara, for which Swen Sang came all the way from China to study Yogacara. And continuous and long practice over centuries of Yogacara led to the birth of Vajrayana or Tantrayana at Nalanda. So these are the three main forms of philosophies from Nalanda, and how they have impacted the Buddhism, spread of Buddhism, not only in India but also all rest of the Asia. And that's so for example, many in for example, the Nalanda, the doctrines of Yogacara school crystallized at Nalanda traveled with its scholar to other lands, forming, you know, three schools of Buddhism in China. And these principles also influenced the formation of Neo-Confucianism in Suyuanas, which is academic of classical learning of China, and was subsequently practiced in Japan and Korea. And Yogacara also formed the two key school of Tibet. And one of these schools is followed by the 14th Dalai Lama himself. Uh, Tantrayana, as you know, or Vajrayana, was practiced at Nalanda, and it Vajrayana led to which had a what was Vajrayana, that it was characterized by its practice was characterized by mantra dharani or chanting and the making of mandalas, Buddhist devotional images, and mudras, ritual gestures. Uh, and It traveled, recently in Ratnagiri, in Odisha, the huge head of Buddha has been found, and it has been uh, discovered that it was a great center for Tantra practice. But Guru Acharya Padma Sambhava or Guru Rinpoche carried the Tantric Buddhist principles developed at Nalanda to Tibet, assimilating the same with the local form religion. Padmasambhava made Buddhism acceptable to the wider society in Tibet, which accepted it as a state religion. And he is also credited with having established the Nyingma school of Tibetan Buddhism, from which other schools of Tibetan Buddhism originated. You also have the practice of Vajrayana in Mongolia. And the Madhyamaka, the one which I was talking about by Nagarjuna, Madhyamaka has had a huge impact on the world actually, and several schools of or several principles of Madhyamaka became schools actually of philosophy in China. And what we know, Chan actually comes from Dhyan. Chan remains one of the two living sects in China till date, and there are at least three sects which bases its fundamental truth of Madhyamaka schools have greatly impacted the socio-cultural life of China for more than 8 centuries, and have shaped the disciplines of history and philosophy in China, apart from forming the crux of Tibetan Lamaism. In Japan, as many as 8 sects of Buddhism are influenced by the principles of Madhyamaka schools developed at Nalanda. So these are, the Jain Buddhism, what we know as Jain Buddhism. So three branches of Jain Buddhism, which is basically a transportation of the Sanskrit word dhyan, was introduced to China based on Madhyamaka principles, and it influenced the great. It found great followers among the Japanese warriors, enhancing their capability of controlling the mind. And also from the monochrome paintings, tea ceremony, and ikebana, ikebana, to the formulation of Bushido or Japanese chivalry, Zen Buddhism has made significant contributions to the development of Japanese culture. So these are all impact of Nalanda, the three great philosophies of Nalanda: Madhyamaka, Yogacara, and Vajrayana.
So, in your book, you mentioned that Zhuangzang writes, I'll read it out. You write, he further adds that the land on which Nalanda was built was a mango grove in the center of which was a pool that was
Mhm,
home to a serpent, Naga, named
mhm,
Nalanda, the
mhm,
origin of the monastery's name.
mhm.
So, two questions. One, what you've have you come across any other explanations for the origin of the word Nalanda or what it may mean? And the second, was that a major factor in choosing the cover of the book as it stands very
Mhm,
beautifully?
mhm.
Was that a deciding factor as well?
Exactly. So, see, Magad particularly had a culture of age-old culture of serpent worship, actually. And in fact, the early Buddhism, Buddha is not depicted as a god. That's the difference between Hinayana and Mahayana. In Mahayana, Buddha becomes a god, while in Hinayana, Buddha is a human being. And so Buddha is actually represented through tree and serpents in the early Buddhism. And this is precisely because Nagarjuna is known as Nagarjuna because he retrieves the Pragya Paramita Sutra from the Nagas. And so cult of serpent worship is very prevalent in Magad. Actually, in Rajgira, actually you can still today go and see Manyar Mutt, which is a place for serpent worship. So Nalanda is actually, according to the legends, is a place blessed by Naga. So that's why it's known as Nag Ananda, a blessed serpent. So, and that blessed serpent, Swensang says that he lives in this pond, which is full of lotus flowers and is surrounded by mango groves. And the serpent's name is Nalanda. So, there are other names of Nalanda. For example, uh, other meanings of name of Nalanda. One is Na Alamda, means to give without stopping. So it's like giver of knowledge, incessant giver of knowledge, uh, without any end, without any stop, any pause. And this is also from Nalam. Nalam is the lotus stalk, which was in the pond. But there is also, there is this plant which grows in Magad, in that area particularly, and this is known as white man's beard, in English. And it's called sarkanda locally, but but that could also be the origin of the name Nalam. Nala is like a sarkanda. It's like the stalk of that plant which grows very frequently and in abundance in Nalanda and Rajgir. In fact, the new Nalanda University has that plant in plenty. And the cover, you can see is here. It's not a naga, but it's a serpent. It's a python actually. I think it's the publisher has taken the liberty of using, for the visual purposes, using a python instead of a naga. But you see here the python is in the shape of four in Hindi. Char hai. This is how you write char in Hindi. And this is symbolic because these are four noble truths of Buddhism. Nalanda being a Buddhist center for learning. And the lotus, of course, is from the lotus pond. In the in the new cover, which is in the reprint, there are eight lotuses, denoting the eightfold path of Buddha for enlightenment. So that's the symbol of, and this is a mandala. You can see the mandala.
Very, very thoughtful, bro. Okay, so you said that you originate from Rajgir. Of course, Rajgir, now Rajgir, the location of Rajgir was a very important center of discussion. It remains an important center of discussion in your book. And it has shown how it contributes to the success of Nalanda as an institution as well. So, could you describe to us the historical importance of Rajgriha to both the upkeep of Nalanda in terms of its popularity, where people want to visit Nalanda, and also in terms of its upkeep in terms of finances, where different dynasties that are coming into power are actively funding the education at Nalanda.
Hmm. Well, see, Nalanda comes much later actually, but Rajgriha plays a crucial role in the development of Nalanda because initially Rajgriha is like New York and Nalanda is like New Jersey, So it's a Nalanda is a suburb of Rajgriha. Rajgriha is the major city of the Magad. It's the capital city of Magad. It's a cosmopolitan place where all kind of seekers and philosophers are, present. So you have 6 philosophers present in Rajgriha. I mean, in fact, Rajgriha that time, and Buddha is one of them. Mahavira is another one, and so the Sariputra and Mogglayana, they come from Nalanda to Rajgriha, searching for enlightenment, searching for knowledge, and they have a pact that if one their childhood friends, so they have an agreement that if one of us finds the path, will inform the other. Whoever finds the uh, enlightenment or the path to enlightenment first. So that time Buddha is has after leaving his palace in Kapilavastu, comes to Rajgriha and is welcomed by the king Bimbisar, and Bimbisar tries to influence him to not to go searching for enlightenment but become part of his court. And Buddha refuses that. He goes to Bodh Gaya, gains enlightenment, but still he loves Rajgir, and he comes back after Sarnath, giving his first sermon at Sarnath. He comes back to Rajgir, where Bimbisara gives him a pond, which is and a bamboo grove, which is known as Venuvan. It's still there today, and it has a pond called Karandaka Pond, where Buddha takes bath, stays there, meets the new disciples. It's there where he met Sariputra in Venuvan, and then he goes to Gridhakut Parvat, walks there to give sermons, to preach, and so that's the historic importance of Rajgriha. And Rajgriha, later on, the capital, the Ajatasattu, who is son of King Bimbisar, he usurps the throne of Magad. He takes over his father, and then he builds he has imperial ambitions. He's an expansionist, just like his father, and he builds a small fort at Patli Grama, which is on the bank of the river Ganga, keeping in mind the Briji Federation, which is just across the Ganga, hoping that someday he would be able to conquer them, and that little fort becomes later Patliputra, or the second capital of Magad. And so Rajgriha's importance then slowly declines, but because it's now not the capital anymore. And when Emperor Ashoka, he comes to Nalanda, he's based in Patliputra. He's not based in Rajgriha. But Rajgriha is still important because it's the first capital, and Nalanda is very close to Rajgriha. So, and it has the stupas where Buddha's remains are there. Ajatasattu had built stupas for Buddha. So he comes there and he gets those stupas uncovered, in the sense to find the bones of, or the remains of, Buddha. And so that's how Rajgriha plays an important role in the and though Rajgriha is not the capital, but it's still an important city throughout the Magad history.
So when we come to the finances of Nalanda, of course, you've mentioned that students who came on the basis of merit. They didn't have to pay anything per se to the institution.
Mhm.
So was the Nalanda finance largely based on royal patronages? And if it was, did that mean that Nalanda at some point or the other also saw a tightening of its purses if certain dynasties fell down?
Mhm. Yes, so that's correct. So Nalanda was mostly dependent on royal patronage, and that's one of the reasons why it declined over a period of time. Because when the royal patronage declined, the funding declined, and uh, uh, and so that's you know. Swansong mentions six monasteries built by six kings, for example. So it was not only the day-to-day upkeep of the for maintenance of the daily needs of the monks, but also building of the construction of the monastery. So he mentions six kings like Sakraditya, who is Kumaragupta one, Bajra, Buddhagupta, Tathagata Baladitya, and Harshavardhana. So these are the six kings as the great patrons of Nalanda. King Harshavardhana, for example, is mm, uh, is is considered to allocate 200 villages. Uh, for example, the Chinese monk Itzing records that the lands and the possessions bestowed upon the monastery by the kings of many generations contained more than 200 villages, and a daily supply of large quantity of rice, butter, milk, etc. are contributed every day by the householders in these 200 villages. So you have then the also the rich merchants uh, making donations to the monastery, also by the laity. The laity in the sense the people who are not monks, but they are Buddhists. They are also contributing to the monastery, but mainly it's the royal patronage which is sustaining the Nalanda.
So I want to take this forward. I want to talk about Sariputra. To someone who's not an avid reader of history, the name may not even strike a bell, and yet, his contribution to the very strengths of Buddha Dharma and Nalanda are very invaluable. Okay, as one can gauge from your book. I mean, there are quotes. If I may quote the book, there is a part where it says that it is believed that the Bodhisattva propounded the heart of perfection of wisdom or heart sutra to Sariputra in the
Right,
presence of Buddha, in the first line of which states, form is emptiness, emptiness is form.
right.
So, sir, I want to ask you, could you please elaborate on who Sariputra was and
Mhm.
why was he such a central figure to both Buddha Dharma and to Nalanda? As someone like to, and in a way, like for someone who is not at all a student of history, if one were to explain to them.
Mhm. So Sariputra was his childhood name was Upatisha, and he was born as the same day as his friend Kolita, whom we know as Mogliaina, and both came from Nalanda or nearby, in the vicinity of Nalanda. They were born, and Sariputra, he comes from a great family of debaters, or who are scholars of Tark Shastra. And in fact, his father, I mean, he's named after his father Upatisha, but his father decides that his mother is much more learned, and therefore he should be named after his mother, and that's why he becomes his mother name is Sarika, which means Maina, bird Maina, and he becomes Sariputra. And so Sariputra, he and Mogliana, they both go to Rajgrah together as friends go. That let's go to Rajgriha and find some way to enlightenment and find the reality, true nature of reality. Because that time, as people today want to become entrepreneurs or civil servants, that time people wanted to get enlightened. So they go to Rajgriha and they are trying different philosophers, and they they are disciples of one philosopher called Sanjay Belatiputta, and but they are not happy with his teachings. And one day they hear in the streets of Rajgriha that the monk Aswajit, he's teaching the Buddha's words, or Buddha's what Buddha has found. And he says ye dharma hetu, that's what he hears, which means all that arise from a cause. Tathagata means Buddha has explained their cause and their end. Thus has spoken the great sage. And hearing these words, Sariputra, he attains the primary stage of enlightenment. He finds a way that this is the right way, and he goes to Sarip Mogliana and tells him this, and Mogliana also hears this, and he also attains the first stage of enlightenment. And then both of them, they go to Buddha along with 500 more followers of Sanjay Belatiputta, and they join Buddha uh, in the Venuban. And Buddha very pleased with, I think, the numbers, and and also their devotion, designates him as chief male disciples, because each Buddha, as per the tradition, has to have two male disciples and two female disciples. So, and Sariputra is designated as the Dharma Senapati, or the general of the righteousness. And he is the one who is responsible for. He teaches in absence of Buddha. He gives. He makes the rules for the how the sangha will will function, who can be enter, who can enter, who can, what would be the rules, etc. So he is the person who is responsible for the day-to-day functioning of the sangha. And Mogliana is his childhood friend. He's credited with making the first image of Buddha, which is called Udayana Buddha. And also, he's a great at rituals, and he's he's considered to contribute a great deal on the mystic side of Buddhism. So they both of them, they play a crucial role in growth of Buddhism as a religion. Buddha was, of course, he was enlightened and he gave the sermons, but it's Sariputra actually, who takes his teachings forward. He systemizes them, he makes them, he organizes them, and that's why you have Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara giving Hriday Pragya Paramita Sutra, which we know as Heart Sutra, to Bodhisattva, to Sariputra at Gridikut Parvat in Rajgriha. Though this happens in presence of Buddha, in the sense Buddha is nodding to what Bodhisattva has taught Sariputra, and this one is we know it from the Pragya Paramita Sutra, which actually is considered to be written much later by Nagarjuna himself, almost 600 years later. But it's attributed to that Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara is giving these sutras to Sariputra.
So, sir, I want to ask you another question. You briefly talked about the curriculum at Nalanda, and prior to that, like in the earlier part of the segment, you had mentioned that students didn't have to pay a fee to get into Nalanda. However, the admission process was very rigorous because, I mean, if you see the kind of intellect which, flowed out of Nalanda in terms of Aryadev or Aryabhat or Asanga, I mean, the intellect was top notch or above par. So, could you elaborate on the admission process and the democratic administration of Nalanda and the kind of impact it had on its scholarship?
So Nalanda was famous for its specialization in the art of debate and discussion and public speaking. Swansung writes, foreign monks came to the establishment to put an end to their doubts, and then became celebrated. Indian and foreign monks from distant places like China, Korea, Tibet, and Tokhara came to India to study at Nalanda and to copy valuable Buddhist manuscripts. 56 Chinese and Korean monks visited India. During the span of 40 years between the visit of Xuanzang and Itzing, and how the admission happened, the Dwarpala Pandit engaged in debates with the monks who wanted to study at the Mahavihara. A large number of them were turned back. The keeper of the gate posed some difficult questions. Many were unable to answer and retired. Swensang notes that of those from abroad who wished to enter the school of discussion, the majority, beaten by the difficulties of the problems, withdrew, and those who were deeply versed in old and modern learning were admitted, only 2 or 3 out of 10 succeeding. This was the then Itzing, the another Chinese monk says that a student at 15 had to study Vritti Sutra, which he finished at 20. After which he studied philosophy for 2 or 3 years at advanced institutions like Nalanda or Ballavi. So it can be said that students seeking admission at Nalanda must have been in their 20s and above because they had to prepare for all these. They had to know a lot of things before they could enter the university. And you asked about the democratic principles, and so Nalanda, everything was decided. For example, allocation of the rooms to the monks, those who were admitted. So it was based on seniority. Uh, the new entrants and senior monks had harmonious relations among themselves, and any dispute was resolved through discussion, which became the Nalanda tradition of resolving conflicts. And it is said that throughout the history of Nalanda, over almost 1,000 years, you can say, there was no dispute among the uh, no rebellion, no dispute which was not resolved democratically and amicably.
So I take this to sort of so you mention a very moving poem. You've written a very moving poem in the introduction. I wish to read that out for the readers, although you would do a better job of it than I would. Uh, so the poem is entitled "The Day of Massacre at Nalanda," and it
Mhm.
goes: Bakhtiyar and his men play buzkashi in my alleys today. Monks are being burnt alive, and those who try to escape are beheaded. Dharmaganj, the nine-storied library, has burst into flames. Smoke and ash from burning books have turned the day into night. The sun has disappeared from the sky today, and even my bricks bleed. Sacred chants that once purified Magad have turned into shrieks of failing humanity. The light of the world is fading today to the ravages of time alone, abandoned, spawned, forgotten, or perhaps to be born into many Nalandas. And such a moving poem. Um, but we still have so many discussions today where there are a lot of historians from there are a
Mhm.
lot of historians from one particular ideology maybe that try and tell us that it was not Bakhtiyar who destroyed it. Maybe
Mhm.
it were two drunk men at the night, or maybe it were Brahmins who came and they destroyed Nalanda. So how much truth is there to that story, and what do we know about the destruction of the Nalanda Institute?
Well, see, to say that Brahmins destroyed Nalanda would be unfair, because Brahmins and Buddhists, they were in, they were in in discussion, in debate for over 1,000 years. I mean, they were there all the time when Buddhism was was taking birth, when Buddhism was evolving, when it came to the peak. So I mean, someone says that, like, somebody did some tapasya and got the mantra, invoked the Surya and mantra, and then they you know they burnt the library, which obviously is laughable, because uh, uh, it would be in the realm of mythology, right? So now, coming to Bakhtiyar Khalji, I must make it clear that there is no direct evidence of Bakhtiyar Khalji destroying Nalanda. To make the point, very clear about it, because there is no historical record of that. But there is a clear historical record of Bakhtiyar Khalji destroying Odantapuri monastery, which is just 10 kilometers away from Nalanda. Just 10 kilometers. So my contention is that you have to, when you are examining a case, you have to examine the mind of the perpetrator, or if a murder has been committed, you examine what was the motive behind it, right? So Bakhtiyar's motive was to loot the rich monasteries of Magad, because he was a raider. He was exactly like what Nadir Shah was in, later, in 500 years later, 400 years later. So he was a raider, and his key goal was to loot all the rich monasteries of Magad, and also the monasteries of Tibet, and which has historical evidence that he has not only raided the monastery of Odantapuri, but the monastery of Telhara, the monastery of Bikramsila, and other Buddhist monasteries of the region, as well as he wanted to go to Tibet and loot and raid these monasteries as well, which he could not succeed, and he was assassinated by his own lieutenant. Uh, you have to see the history of, the life of Bakhtiyar Khalji, who he was actually. So and how he comes to India. So you see what happens, that north of India is and central India is in political vacuum by 1196, as the last Gahadawala dynasty has fallen, and you already have the incursions happening during that time from the northwest of India by the Turks. So Turks find it easy to attack all these places. So Bakhtiyar, only with 200 horses, only with 200 horses, he enters the Odantapuri monastery, which is today known as Bihar Sharif, and what he does at Odantapuri is completely graphically detailed. He kills every monk there. He beheads them. He burns the books there, and then he realizes that it is not a fort. He thought it's a fort, and he realizes that it's not a fort, but it's a madarsa, or a monastery, Vihar, and from there the name comes. Magad becomes Bihar from that time onwards. So now let us see that Odantapuri, which is a newly founded monastery by the Palas, very close to Nalanda, uh, is raided and destroyed by Bakhtiyar Khalji, while the most famous monastery throughout, which is not only famous since last 1,000 years, I mean, which is the most celebrated monastery, the most rich monastery of Magad, most well-known monastery, for which the monks come from all over the world. Bhaktiar would say that, okay, let us not go there because it is, it's Nalanda, so let us spare it. We will just go there, do parikrama, and come back. So that is not understood by me, that a monastery which is second thing, which is just 10 kilometers away, will be spared. Second thing is that there is after 40 years of in 1235 and 36, there is an eyewitness account of a Tibetan monk called Dharma Swami. And Dharma Swami tells that, what is happening at Nalanda, that out of 14 large Mahaviharas, only 2 are functional. And on top of that, these 2 are being continuously raided by the Turuskas, who are based in Odantpuri now, which has turned into a military headquarters. And they come continuously, they raid the monastery, and they go back. So you see, though there is no direct historical record of destruction of Nalanda by Bhaktiar Khalji, I don't think the situation would be conducive when you have a law and order situation within a radius of 10 kilometers for monks to function and to freely conduct their pursuits of knowledge. So and 40 years later, you have a clear evidence of what is happening at Nalanda by Dharma Swami. And but see, what Nalanda does not stop functioning even after that. Nalanda continues to function till early 14th century actually. And there is a monk called Dhyanabhadra who is ordained at Nalanda. So role of Bhaktiar Khalji cannot be. It's common sense, that that there is why does that happen only in the end of 12th century, beginning of 13th century? If Brahmins did that, they were throughout their time. There is why didn't they do that earlier? So that's my question to all those who say these things. And in there's a question of, there's a tradition of Shastrarth. If Brahmins were very good at the rise of Puranical Brahmanism is one of the reasons I give for the decline of Nalanda, decline of Buddhism, because Buddhism became more like Puranic Brahmanism, full of rituals by the end of 12th century. And it became indistinguishable from the Hindu rituals. So Buddha became an avatar of Vishnu, and the Siddhas of Nalanda, who were the practitioner of Tantric Buddhism, they themselves, we all know Baba Gorakhnath, who is considered a Buddhist by the Vajrayana school and a Hindu by the Hindus. So they become indistinguishable, and the rise of Puranical Brahmanism through also being popularized by the Bhakti poets and Bhakti saints, it becomes more popular among the masses, leading to further decline in royal patronage, because royal patronage was also based on what people were practicing. So you have decline of royal patronage, you have the rise of Brahmanical Hinduism, and then the last nail in the coffin is the raids by Bhaktiar Khalji and the Turks. It could be other Turks as well, but there's a clear evidence of Turks raiding Nalanda, because a chain mail has been found, which is of Central Asian origin at Nalanda site, there are evidence of burning in each of the monasteries. So I leave everyone to decide on the basis of common sense what could have happened at Nalanda.
So, we'll cover the other reasons that you've talked about shortly. But remaining at, you know, putting a central focus on the poem that you've written as well and what we've talked about, you of course have said we've all heard that Nalanda, the Nalanda library. It took about 6 months to burn, and there were flames all over. There was smoke rising, and to add to it, we've all also heard that most of it contained dry paper or leaves, which take seconds to burn. So when we talk about, we have the experience of course, Dharma Swami, as you talked about, who visited between 1234 and 36. So when you talk about the light of the world fading away, what kind of what scale of destruction of Indic knowledge, of Buddhist knowledge, are we talking about here? That is one. And the second is also connected to the poem when you say to be reborn into many Nalandas. What do you mean? Because that is something you echo in the last chapter of the book as well, which is entitled the same thing.
Right. So, see, what happened at Nalanda was Nalanda had a great library, great collection of sutra, probably the largest library in the world of that time, in the first millennium CE. And it had a library of sutras. These were the sutras for which the famous monks like Swen Sang came to. They flocked to Nalanda to copy these sutras and take them back. And evidence that there was a great library comes from Swen Sang himself, because he says that he carried back 657 sutras, which is a minuscule number of what was at Nalanda and what he could copy during the 5 years stay he had at the monastery. So, if Nalanda had no library, what would you copy? So it's Singh, his other, who follows him in the same century, 40 years later, he carries 400 Sanskrit texts with him. And so these texts would have been copied if there was something to be copied, right? If there was a library. So it is said that Dharmaganj had three parts. One was, three buildings were there: Ratna Dadhi, Ratna Ranjak, and Ratna Sagar. And out of this, Ratna Sagar was 9-storied tall. So you can imagine the kind of structure we are talking about. Though now you would say that, how can you say that? Because there is no historical excavated, archaeologically it has not been excavated. So this is based on also on by Taranath, that the Tibetan scholar who is much later, who comes in around 400-500 years ago. And he talks about these libraries, but I think there is so much knowledge we are yet to recover from Nalanda. Only 10% of Nalanda has been excavated, and you asked about the loss of knowledge. I think it was a significant loss of knowledge, because a library like Nalanda was unparalleled. And though many sutras have been copied into and translated into Tibetan and Mandarin and so on, Korean and Japanese, and Indonesian or Bhasa, but I think many of them must be somewhere, because I think when the monks, they fled, they also carried lots of texts, lots of sutras with them. And there is also example of another Nalanda being founded in Tibet right in 15th century. It's called Phenpo Nalendra, because Tibetans call Nalanda as Nalendra. And Phenpo Nalendra is just next to it, very close from Lhasa, and a new Nalanda was founded there. And it was obviously in the memory of the old Nalanda, which was by that time gone. And like example, Dharma Swami gives an example of how he's harassed by the Turuskas, when he's traveling in a boat, they want money from him and so on. So the situation completely changes, and there's a law and order situation. Nobody can travel safely. Everybody's being harassed and raided. So uh, so obviously monasteries cannot function, like that. Imagine a situation when there was a royal patronage and they were sought after, and suddenly you have someone who is harassing you day in and day out. So, the pursuit of knowledge, that those who say that, there's no evidence of Bhaktiar Khalji destroying Nalanda. At least he created that sense of that climate, of fear, and a climate of where you cannot pursue knowledge, because Nalanda was about pursuing knowledge. So, and then you have decline in, nobody is supporting the monastery anymore in a major way, though there are evidences of small supports from the Pithapatis of Bodh Gaya to Nalanda. So this is what happens, and you have a huge loss of knowledge, which was acquired. Nalanda, imagine, Nalanda is from the time of Nagarjuna. So you have so much of knowledge being acquired and put into books, and suddenly you don't have anymore. So it's not only the loss for India or for Magad, but it's loss for the whole world. It's the loss of global intellectual heritage. And whatever, probably so much of text has not been translated. When Rahul Sanskritan went to Tibet, he found lots of manuscripts from Nalanda being stored there. I think we don't really know how much survived from that period.
So, sir, in terms of post-destruction of Nalanda, your book also covers the extensive decline of Buddhism as a religion. And there are several reasons attached to it, and they're both related to the Islamic conquest as well as, the structure of both the Indian state and the Buddha Dharma itself. So my question is, could you elaborate on the slaughter of the Buddhist priesthood, specifically during the Islamic conquest, which specifically led to the decline of the religion, and why a similar pattern was not observed with respect to killing of the Brahmins in the Sanatan fort?
Well, see, there's a difference between becoming a priest, Buddhist priest, and becoming a Hindu priest. Hindu priest, you can, if you are a Brahmin, you can start tomorrow. With uh, you can get a marriage done, you can do the various rituals and all. But it's not like that in Buddhism. For to become a monk, you have to be ordained in Buddhism, and it takes time. You have to know all the James, like Tripitaka and all, all the basic learning that has to take place, and it's about 20 years of age. Probably you could be ordained as a Buddhist priest, or maybe 15 year or something. But you have to
Hmm.
really know all those things.
Hmm.
So once, for example, when Bhaktiyar Khalji attacked Udantapuri, he wanted somebody to explain what are written in these books, but nobody had survived to read them. So that's what happened. No one was left to ordain new monks, and ordaining a monk was not that you become the monk. I am telling you to become the monk. You have to know everything to become a monk. So knowledge, it took time. It took 10, 15 years to become a monk, and that was not the time was not there. No one was left uh, to ordain new monks. So that's the difference between, that's a fundamental difference between Buddhism and Brahmanism. uh, 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 Another thing is that decline of Buddhism was also because of, assimilation of Buddhist deity into Puranic Brahmanism or in Hinduism. So you have lots of assimilation, including Buddha becoming Vishnu, and so on. Uh, that is the beauty of of Hinduism, to assimilate each and every one. I mean, Hinduism does not really destroys or burns. It assimilates, and that's a greater power to accommodate and assimilate every possible form of faith. uh, so that's then the third thing was the decline in the royal patronage. And as you can see, the Palas were the last great patrons of Buddhism actually was already in decline even during the time of Xuanzang, in the 7th century AD. If you look at his descriptions, he says that the monasteries in the northwest India are desolate. They are turning into ruins. Nobody is to look after them. It was Magad where Buddhism was flourishing, and for almost 400-500 years, when it was already in decline in other parts of the world, other parts of India actually. So that's Nalanda was destroyed earlier as well. So there are two more incidences of destruction of Nalanda. One by the Hindu king Shashank, uh, uh, and from Bengal, from Gaudapada, and but it was rebuilt by Harshvardhana. So Harshvardhan had made it sure that Nalanda continued to function. And Huna had also destroyed Nalanda right at the beginning, of when it was founded. But the third time, when the Nalanda was destroyed, there was nobody there to rebuild it. So that's another example of why Buddhism declined. It was the decline and end of royal patronage to Buddhism in India.
And so over time, Buddhism grew more and more exclusive and ritualistic. So, how did this evolution of Buddhism impact its growth?
Because Buddhism became esoteric, in the sense that esoteric is anything which moves away from the masses, right? So it became the practice in the monasteries mainly. So monks were practicing it, while the masses were not able to understand how to practice tantric Buddhism. And when it became more ritualistic, it also started resembling Hinduism. So it was not anything different, which it did not have a separate philosophical orientation anymore. So it became indistinguishable. So you have one thing is that it's becoming esoteric. Second, it's becoming indistinguishable from Hinduism. And then you have the popular bhakti saints who are taking Hinduism to the masses, probably who were Buddhists, and now they are slowly coming to the fold of Hinduism. So these were other reasons for the decline of Buddhism in India. In
And
fact,
so, sorry, sir,
yes, if
continue.
you go to Nalanda and ask somebody who Sariputra, they will be surprised. Who was that? Who was he?
So, how did the decline of Buddhism, or let's say the changing nature of Buddhism, impact Nalanda as a whole?
So, see, Nalanda was mainly, whatever it was a Buddhist center of learning. It was a Buddhist Mahavihara. The, the noble Bhikshu Sangh uh, of, of Nalanda. So it was a Buddhist institution, and decline of Buddhism obviously impacted the decline of Nalanda. Nalanda was not receiving royal patronage after it was raided, and it was continuously raided over decades by the Turks. It was getting very little support to maintain one or two monasteries which were barely functioning, and in lack of uh, royal patronage, no one was to rebuild those burnt monasteries. No one was there to support the day-to-day necessities of the monks. So obviously it impacted Nalanda's existence, and it slowly passed into oblivion.
So, with that, we come to the end of all the questions that we had. At the very end, I'll leave our listeners with two small bits. One is something that Dr. Anand Rangnathan says, and it stuck with me, that there's no Hitler Street in Tel Aviv. And the very place that we have to land to go to Nalanda today is named Bhaktiyarpur. So that is one small thing to think about. And the second is from the brilliant Heart Sutra of Lokiteshvara. Uh,
Avalokiteshvara. Mhm.
yeah, I'm very sorry for the. So there's this brilliant paragraph that I would like to read because we're shooting it on the day of Mahashivratri. And this actually sort of made me smile when I read this in your book. इह सरिपुत्र रूपम शून्यता शून्यतैव रूपम
Mhm.
रूपम न पृथक शून्यता शून्यता य न पृथक रूपम यद रूपम स शून्यता य शून्यता तद रूपम. Thus, yes, thus Sariputra, form is emptiness, and emptiness itself is form. Emptiness is nothing but form, and form is nothing but emptiness. That which is form is emptiness, and that which is emptiness is form. So very thoughtful message to leave you with. Thank you
That
so much.
reminds me of Shankaracharya's poem or song, Shivoham, Shivoham.
Absolutely. Uh, that is why I was immediately reminded of both this and of this amazing Ashtavakra Gita, which also talks about that there is no attachment, no detachment, and no dissolution because you were not attached in the first place. So, very close to my heart. Thank you so much for being here with us today, sir. It has been an honor to talk to you for so long and to understand so many questions that actually came to our mind while reading the book, and a lot that was covered by the book as well, but we wanted our readers to know. And thank you so much to our readers for tuning in and for listening to us. And we will see you
I
next
just want
week.
to add that Nalanda has risen in the sense that it's
Correct.
no more. Uh, it has taken various avatars. Nalanda institutions named after Nalanda are now all across the globe, in USA, in France, in Brazil, in Australia, and in our own Nalanda, where Nalanda uh, was functioned for so many centuries. We have the Nalanda University now, which is a new university which has been set up. It's an international university, and it's a university which is a net zero campus. It has a beautiful architecture, and we are all very proud of the rise of Nalanda. So, and Nalanda was an immortal idea. Only its physical structures could have been destroyed. But Nalanda means the quest of knowledge. It means sharing of knowledge. And I think the principles of Nalanda, the memory of Nalanda lives on, and it will continue to inspire generations to come for millennia. Thank you.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
sir.
Thank you.